Lawson. Got my official Tea Party hat, so I'm happy. And I'll just give my one plug. I am running for judge, so remember, Lawson for the law, Lawson for judge. And I'll move on to my topic. When I met with some of these folks, they asked me to come in and talk to you about a very important subject, which is courts, justices, and judges, and what is their role under the Constitution, since we all know that judicial activism is one of the re-emerging problems throughout our history. I mean, the issue of judicial activism, of judges making law and not upholding the law, has been going on since literally the founding of our country. And so they asked me to come out and spend about 20 minutes talking about how we got to where we are and what did the founders really envision for judges to do under the Constitution. Because frankly, when you go to law school and take a constitutional law class, the odd thing is you very rarely actually read this document. This is actually the copy I was given on the first day of law school. Actually, it was given to me by the folks from West Publishing in hopes I'd buy more of their books, but it's a great little book. And the odd thing is in constitutional law class, you're talking about the cases and the interpretation of the Constitution all the time. They very rarely actually ask you anything about the Constitution itself. So with that, we need to look at what the founders intended. And it's very obvious to everyone in this room and to anyone with any lick of common sense that the founders intended us to have a limited government. They intended the judiciary to be a co-equal branch of the government to check the executive and legislative branches. And we've all been to high school civics class and we're familiar with that concept. But they really envisioned that the Constitution would need a bulwark against legislators and presidents, something that could protect the people and get government off our back. Because one thing that's been clear since almost the day the Constitution was signed back in 1789, the one thing that's been clear is that almost every day since then, almost every legislative session, and with almost every executive order, our government routinely tries to take away our liberties almost on a daily basis. And in fact, the parallels I will talk about are very similar to the ones that we are seeing now today, with lame duck Congresses passing laws that are unpopular, forcing us to buy health care insurance even if we don't want it, trying to limit what we can do and say and whether we can bear arms, things that are supposedly clear-cut in the Constitution yet are circumvented almost on a daily basis. Now, to look at where we are, let's go back to well before the founding of our nation, to the 1600s and early 1700s, when our country was actually being formed from the colonies themselves. In history, that's known as the early modern period of European history. It actually has two names that tend to be used. We, of course, are familiar with the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. And that was because during that time we saw a big flowering, mostly in Scotland, England, Holland, and to a lesser extent Scandinavia, and of course in the colonies of those nations. We were seeing a flowering of scientific discovery, scholarly reason. Feudalism had essentially ended in those countries because the monarchy had smashed the power of the nobility. So individuals were able to work and aspire to things. The merchant class was rising, money was being developed, trade and commerce were becoming more common. And with that, all the benefits, such as getting an education and spending time on leisurely pursuits or finding things that better your life. But at the same time, there was another action going on, because this age was also known as the Age of Religious Wars. While we were seeing the English Renaissance almost at the same time, on continental Europe, life was very different. You had the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 that wiped out approximately 30 to 40% of the population in areas of Germany, Italy, France, Czechoslovakia, Poland. Far worse than anything we've imagined even in the Second World Wars. Devastation that would literally handicap that region for close to 100 years. It's part of the reason why England did so much better. This was an era where the power of the church was political in places like Spain and Italy, places where the church had political power and would use it oppressively on many occasions, leading to the conflicts of the Reformation. We have forgotten that when we look over at Islam and see them clashing with each other on a regular basis, we forget that about 500 years ago, we had a very similar problem with bloody wars being fought ostensibly over religious differences, but really over the political power of a very powerful church. and later very powerful churches. And it was in this era where you had two dichotomies, extreme privation and extreme success, that people began to wonder, why is life better in some places than others? Now, quick show of hands, who knows the name of Adam Smith's book? Anyone?
The Wealth of Nations.
Close. The full title of that book is An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And Adam Smith was just one of many individuals who was trying to understand, why is life better in England than it is in Germany? They're both monarchies. There is no real democracy at this point. Religion is still largely controlled by the state, although not as much. But they noticed something different. They noticed in some places there was liberty of some sort. In England, you didn't have a lot of democratic freedom in the political sense, but you could be a merchant. You could move around. You could start your own business. You could become a privateer. You could go to sea. You could engage in trade and commerce. And no, it wasn't perfect. You still sometimes had to bribe the right person or have the right royal patron or whatnot. But life was better. People could pretty much do what they want because, as people like Adam Smith learned, life is better when government leaves you alone. And this is what's generally seen as natural law. And of course, for those of you who don't know, natural law is the concept that's been around for many, many years. We would see it with Aristotle, Cicero, St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. The concept had been around for quite some time. And in fact, it's even in the Bible. If you'll indulge me, in Paul's letter to the Romans, he states, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do the things contained in the law, although not having the law, are a law unto themselves, and their conscience bearing witness." And what that means is this: we all have a survival instinct to survive, do what it takes to live. But man is different. Man has been endowed by his Creator with this notion of liberty and a conscience, and that there are natural laws that we follow. For example, we feel guilty if we kill someone, if we steal from someone, if we do harm to someone, even if that advances our interest. If I steal bread from someone to keep my family alive, that might be necessary, but I may still feel guilty about it. People often who have to kill an intruder in their homes are often wrecked by guilt, even though they were perfectly and morally right to do so. And that's the whole idea of natural law, that our rights and our liberty are given to us by God, or if you are an atheist, at least by virtue of our existence. Rights aren't given by county commissions or the federal government or any secular authority. They exist as a part of nature. We have been given free will. God created a rational world with rules and laws and scientific principles so that we could exercise our free will and live up to our potential as human beings. And this was the idea that a large number of thinkers began to adopt in this era as they tried to reconcile the religious wars and the privation with the fact that life was better in places. They realized governments of man were the problem, whether it was a religious dictatorship, whether it was a secular prince, a monarchy, or nobility. Controlling people's lives led to bad things. And this was seen in all the great scholars we've all heard and hopefully read: David Hume, John Locke, Edward Coke, Richard Hooker, Thomas Hobbes. Our own founders, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Thomas Paine, all were advocates of natural law. And it's when they came to the United States, or what would become the United States, and lived here. These were all folks who had largely fled the oppressiveness or the lack of opportunity in their home countries, mostly in England, because in America they were left alone and could thrive. This is where second and third sons of landowners came. This is where skilled tradesmen came if they could not get into a guild or they could not find a job. So this was a group that was very much into a limited government. They decided that our natural state is one of liberty, and that government is necessary to protect us only from those who would impose their will or take our liberty from us by force, and that government should do no more than that.